Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Christian podcast. Welcome to James. Hi, James.
Hey, Dean.
Hey, I'm Tim, and it's great to have you with us. Perhaps you're finding us for the first time, in which case, where have you been? This is our fourth or fifth. No, it's our fifth, isn't it? Looking at this topic of the healthy Christian and how the gospel can lead to health on every level. And it's following our Sunday series here at Grace Church Milton Keynes, where we've been preaching through this topic of being a health Christian and some really kind of gritty topics on health. We've done emotional health, mental health, relational health next week. That one's to come. We've done physical health, and then
Spiritual
yesterday
health we've done as
we've done
well.
spiritual health. Thanks, James. Good reminder. But yeah, yesterday James spoke on financial health, which was brilliant. I wasn't in the room. I was kind of with you in spirit, but I was away doing some training. But have caught up and really enjoyed your message, mate. So well done, fantastic. Definitely go back and watch that and listen to that if you haven't done already. Some of what James talked about yesterday, we won't kind of recover, and so yeah, we'll try and get the balance right between what we kind of pick up on and maybe some more depth we go into today. Um, but yeah, well done, mate, for that. And praise God for this series. I feel
Mm.
like we're getting the opportunity to speak into topics and areas with more depth and
Yeah,
more clarity than perhaps we might in other ways and other times. And I
yeah.
really felt you served me well. I was moved in my heart as I was listening about um, how easy it is to just kind of have that love of money and
Mm,
that dependency on it, that kind of where you're kind of
mm.
security is. So yeah, thank you. I'm sure that was the case for everyone listening in, that it wasn't just a head thing, it was a heart thing. So
Thank you.
yeah, so I thought just to start us off, firstly to say we have had a couple of questions in, so thank you for people who've asked questions. Actually, the questions came in ahead of yesterday, and you spoke to some of them, and they got some of what got covered yesterday did speak to those, and a couple of the questions you left us with at the end of your message, we'll cover them as well. So just to say, we're kind of folding them in. I
Mhm.
guess let me start here, James, by asking you. Um, what did you wish you had more time to talk about? Well,
Mm,
like we've asked this of each other a little bit, but what ended up on the cutting floor, or what was too heavy, too
yeah,
deep, too tricky to kind of
yeah.
go into on a Sunday series that you perhaps would love us to particularly spend time on today?
It's funny, you and I have talked about in the past how you know reducing reducing the length of a sermon is one of the hardest things. So there's a famous quote, isn't there? I would have written you a shorter letter, whoever this famous writer was. But unfortunately, I didn't have time to do so. So that's often where the time pressure comes in. There were lots and lots of things. I had more examples that illustrated the points. I used Will Smith as an example. There was another example I
Mm,
had from a music producer called Rick Rubin, quite a famous one, and he talked about how depression can hit when you achieve your dreams in a really, really evocative, really, really memorable way. He talked about it. So
wow.
you hit a certain achievement, success, and only then you realize how it's not going to satisfy you. Um, there was I would have liked to have talked more about money as a thing. Um, so
Okay.
it was quite clear the emphasis, I think, throughout the passages I focused on, and from Jesus himself, that money has the potential to control us, essentially, to act as a god. And that's something that I think everyone we need to acknowledge and be aware of. You can't
Mm,
serve both God and money.
mm,
But I didn't, I didn't have the time and space to then assume, okay, let's say you've done the work there and you're acting with faith, and you're in the right place in terms of holding the things that God has given you as a steward. Then having money is a good thing. The great things you can do with money, investing in things,
yeah.
starting things, helping people, creating, startups or businesses, or investing in ethical ways. Um, Often new things to get off the ground requires money. And
Mm,
so, the absolute joy of being in a position in which you could be investing and God can use you to invest in starting new things for benefit of society, benefit of the church. It could be a new ministry. It could be helping people achieve a dream. It could be about helping others create wealth.
mm,
And there are people in our church who are successful in their lives. God has made them successful, whether as business owners and or in their careers. And I would love to have talked about how getting those people together, um, and mentoring each other and kind of inputting faith and setting kind of vision and goals. So it's that kind of wow, what next kind of thing, whether that could be church planting, it could be starting new charities, or meeting needs right now in Milton Keynes. Or I would have loved to have talked more widely about some of those things. I didn't have the chance to, and I had some questions as well that I asked at the end, which I didn't have time to get into, which we'll
yeah.
probably talk about later.
Yeah, let's just jump into them in a bit. Yeah, you made me think though, that is there a gift of making money, a gift of
Mm.
being a good businesswoman or businessman? I mean, I'm thinking of the parable of the talents, which maybe isn't about money and possessions, but kind of is. I think you can interpret it that way. And Jesus doesn't say like the one who kind of invests 10 and makes 10. um they're blessed a little, maybe a little bit more by being given the stuff that's wasted, but there's
Yeah,
almost like a recognition that there's difference,
yeah,
on a very simple level with that parable. Perhaps within that we could extrapolate like gifting and blessing, and just recognize that's one of the ways you can invest in the kingdom, one of the ways you can serve your church family.
mm,
I'm preparing for Mothering Sunday coming up and thinking about spiritual parenting. I'm
mm,
just thinking we need help, don't we, within our church family
yes,
in areas like this, all
yeah,
these areas. But I'm
yeah,
just so thankful for people in my life,
yes,
including my parents, but people in the church who help me with wisdom and a kind of way to try things. Underneath it had like principles that you covered, that I've learned from. And I just think, where would I have
me
been
too,
with just trying to do finances in my own strength and with my own lack of
me too,
wisdom?
yeah.
Um,
I'd love,
they,
we talked about this in the past. I'd love maybe at some point in the future to have a mentoring program, which we probably call discipleship. So that could be,
yeah,
for example, a brand new mum being mentored by, an older mum, someone who wants to start a business with one of our business owners,
yeah, brilliant.
someone around, education, finances,
Yeah,
a new husband, a new father, someone who has, experiencing bereavement, being mentored by someone who's gone through, there's just, because in the church we have such diversity of types
hmm,
of people and experiences. And I believe those things happen informally, but you kind of think, oh, wow, there's real gold here in the church family. And to unlock it even more intentionally would be amazing. And finances would be one of those areas.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I would say, if you're listening to this and there aren't people in your life you talk to about money, you get advice. What do
Yeah,
you do with savings? What do you do with making sure you've got margin?
yeah,
How are you not going to the edge of your field?
yes,
Or what do help me think through debt, or help me think through all sorts of these things. How have you approached housing?
yes,
I like, and this is I think this is true at any age. I'm very thankful and grateful I got help and advice and wisdom from my parents, but also definitely from spiritual parents early on.
yeah.
As particularly if you're younger and you're kind of at the start of making these decisions, and that's something we give as well as receive. So again, that's something you could help others with. If that's something you've found wisdom from the Lord on along the way,
Mm,
don't forget the privilege you have and the responsibility you have, I think, to share it with others. Do that in life groups, do that in relationships God gives you. We
brilliant.
need each other, we need God's help and each other's help in this.
Yeah, yeah,
You talked about storing up treasure in heaven, James, and your internet's we'll persevere with your internet, but it's just a little
okay.
freezing occasionally. But just bear with us if you're listening. I think the audio is fine. You talked about storing up treasure in heaven. I heard someone say you can't take it with you, but you can send it ahead, which is quite a nice little phrase. And I thought I wanted to ask you, like, how? Like, how do you think we can store up treasure in heaven?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. I partially left it open because I want life groups to talk about it, because people
Yeah,
will have a whole wide range of ideas and from what they've seen or just from what God is showing them. Um, I think my first and my main answer would be around, when Jesus talks about being rich towards God.
yeah,
And so what I would understand that to mean, and what I was talking about a little bit yesterday, was so the idea of stewardship rather than ownership. And if we're stewarding, then our heart is always towards, am I stewarding in a way that the owner will be happy with and pleased with?
mm,
So that's a heart thing, isn't it? And that's one of the things that came through to me really strongly again yesterday. And I've struggled with my own life in terms of the influence and control money can have over your heart. So I think part of storing up treasures in heaven is my heart right towards God in terms of what I've got? Because I think if our hearts are right, then our actions flow from that. If we're, for example, trusting in resources rather than trusting in God, it's hard to store up treasures in heaven. But if we're trusting in God, we can give away, we can invest, and not be full of the future. So it brings a freedom. So I think that the main thing is where our hearts are at. I would
mm. Good
I'm also
answer.
thinking about the passage in 1 Corinthians 13, which if I give up my body to the flames, if I give stuff away but have not love,
Mm,
so again I think that's a link to the heart. It's
yeah,
I receive salvation, I receive love from God, and it transforms my heart, and then my heart attitude is or should be of, and can increasingly be, of love towards others. And I think when we're motivated by love, which is a doing word, it's not just something, it's not an emotion that we feel, then our actions follow, and we will want to love in practical ways, and that will be meeting others' needs, it will be giving money away, it will be helping. um, and I think those two things, trusting in God and being motivated by love, will mean our actions effectively store up treasures in heaven. So
mm,
it's not only about the action. You could give away £1 million, but actually be motivated by, that just makes me feel good, or I want to announce it with trumpets because I'm going to get, it's a humble brag, and I want other people to notice. That's not storing up treasures in heaven, because it wouldn't please the Father because of the heart attitude behind it.
yeah. Yeah, thank you for that emphasis because I think I'd have jumped into a bit more like of a doing kind of answer, but your kind of heart emphasis is brilliant there. And I think kind of I was thinking as well, just to remember when, perhaps you're giving sacrificially, perhaps you're making a different choice in terms of employment where you could earn more money, but actually you're moving because God's moving you onwards to advance the kingdom in a way, or you're keeping a bit of time free to serve
Yeah,
Him. It's like it's
yeah,
not lost.
yeah,
I think it's not like, oh, I have to get what I can here, because you only live once and I need to make the most of this life. Well, actually, remember the next life, and remember, actually, God's
yeah,
no man's debtor. And as you
yeah.
serve Him, even in the sacrifice and pain of some of that, even where it could feel like loss here.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think I think it should. Should is a dangerous word, but I think it
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it seems to in the Apostle Paul's life and in Jesus' life. Actually, there is a sacrificial following here, but there's an
yeah.
investment there, and there's
Yes.
a recognition.
Yeah,
Actually, that's what counts.
yeah.
It's not the kind of yeah, it's not this life that we're living for. So that's really helpful. Do you mind me throwing another couple of questions your
Let's
way?
go. Yeah, go for it. I'll come back to you at some points,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
How can I kill the love of money in my
Mm,
life?
yeah.
How can we? How can I?
Yeah, I'm not really sure because I haven't killed it in my own life.
I do. I just let's just
Fully.
pause on that. Let's pause in that on that and just be honest. It sneaks back in.
Yeah.
I heard someone talk about mammon as
Yes.
the
Yeah,
idol
yeah,
of mammon as
yes.
something you have to kill every day.
Yeah.
and it's not
Yeah,
something. It's like it's not a once for all, and now it comes back, and it's something on in this life we will fight regularly and
yeah.
ongoingly.
There's a few things there, aren't there? There's like an old Puritan quote, I'm sure: be killing sin.
Yes.
There's also, offer yourself as a living sacrifice. It's not
Yeah.
it doesn't happen once, it's continually. And I think I said in my sermon as well. So it's just shown up differently for me in different times in my life. I don't think I found some things that challenging when I was younger, when I didn't have commitments and responsibilities, and really changed for me when we had children. Um,
Yeah. Thank you for
Particularly
sharing your story. It was really useful and helpful.
when we were struggling for money when the boys were young as well, particularly at those points. And so, yeah, I don't think I've got anything that different or deep to say than the sermon. In my own life, I think and I think this is generally true. I think there's something about giving money away.
Give it away. Yeah.
Whether that's through like you said before, choices around like I'll take this job rather than that job, so I won't be earning as much, um, so I can, have time to invest in the kingdom, so I can have more time with my family, so that I've got a more balanced life. Or it's about the actual giving away of the money to
Yes.
people or to causes. It's just so counterintuitive.
It's
Uh,
counterintuitive to the world's view, isn't it?
yeah, 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 yeah. And I think what you said as well about you were saying, things should be costly, and I agree with that as well. I think God can take us on a journey of sacrificial giving, and I wouldn't say that I'm an expert and have much to add to with that, but I do think that sometimes it can feel easier for me to give because it's part of the budget, it's part of the plan. There's no real challenge there, and then at other times, just sensing I feel a bit nudged towards this. Do I shut that down, or do I ask God, okay, God, are you showing me this need, this is an opportunity, and you're asking me to have faith, to exercise faith, and faith can look crazy to people outside of your relationship with God.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
and there's wisdom needed there. There'll be some principles in terms of, like I said yesterday, if you're in debt, pay off your debt first before you kind of feel like you want to give generously to God or do different things. I think that's important. Um, but I think there's something about sacrificial giving as well, which can really kill that love of money.
yeah. Yeah. You've said several things I'd love to kind of comment on. Come back to me if I don't remember on the kind of pay off your debt first one.
Mm.
But just to say, going back to the kind of war idea, the spiritual battle element,
Yeah,
and you said give it away. Like, how do I
yeah,
kill the love of money or give it away? And I heard
yeah,
someone say, that is a declaration of war, and it's an
yeah,
act of war
yeah,
that we need to keep fighting. And it made me think, when we've kind of battled towards getting giving into our budget, whether that's giving away or giving to church. We'll maybe talk a bit about giving back to God
yeah,
specifically in a minute.
yeah,
But you can battle to get it in your budget,
yeah,
and then when it's in your budget and it's normal and it's just kind of part of a standing order, part of what
yeah,
goes out of the bank account every month, there's
yeah,
then a battle for it not to just be
yeah.
so back burner we don't even think about it, and
Hmm.
it's not a heart thing anymore. So
Mm.
there's a battle to kind of keep it in our hearts, isn't it?
Yes.
And you said, there's times where money was so tight for you,
Mm.
and I think there's a battle in that part. And then
Yeah.
there's more money, more problems idea. There's a
Yeah.
there's a there's a battle as well, and a different battle,
Yeah.
but just as much when perhaps there's a bit more extra. For some of us, perhaps money isn't as tight, or there's a little bit extra, a little bit more
Yeah.
kind of freedom in what we choose to spend our money on. Maybe not so much. That's not the same as margin, by the way. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's a battle there as well.
Mm.
You talked about contentment, didn't you?
Yeah.
There's a passage in contentment. I wonder if there's something to say about what it
Yeah.
is to learn to
Yeah.
be content as
Godliness
well.
with contentment is great gain.
Yes, that's right.
And one of the things that I read in preparing and researching was desiring less can have the same, if not greater, impact on our well-being than achieving more or acquiring more.
Yeah,
So
that was a thinker. Yeah, say it again.
desire
Desire.
desiring less. So, and probably that's breaking the link between, okay, I'm only going to be happy if I get that thing.
Yeah. If
Spend
I
money on
can
that
just,
experience, or I buy that thing, or I have that possession. And that's probably a good message for me and for everyone in terms of how complicated and full our lives are in kind of in the West in terms of things we own. And um,
yeah.
yeah, godliness with contentment is great gain, and
Wow.
probably no one would say they've achieved that. That's an ongoing journey. Um,
Paul said he'd achieved it. And so
yeah,
I was reminded of Philippians 4. He says, I know what it is to have plenty. So
yes,
I know what it is to have loads and be able to get a takeaway every week or whatever the Apostle Paul's favorite, equivalent was. And I know what it is to have little,
mm,
cupboards are bare, and I've learned the secret of being content. And
yeah,
you're like, what? Well, what's the secret, Paul? And
yeah,
this isn't all of it, but his next sentence is, I can do all things through Christ who
yeah,
gives
yeah,
me strength.
yes.
So so the Apostle Paul maybe would say, I've learned the secret. I know what it is I have found a way
Mm,
of getting to a place of contentment, whether I've got loads or not much.
yes,
And it's through Christ. I can do all things through Christ. It's
yes,
that dependency.
yeah,
It's on his strength. Whereas so often we do things on our own strength, don't we? And I do believe in budgeting. I do believe in thinking carefully and getting wisdom and stuff. But if we're not careful, we end up, I'm challenged by the fact that I often do things within my capacity, strength, ability that it does come from God. I am stewarding what God's given me, but I can end up living in my own strength a bit in this area.
there's a subtlety to it, isn't there? Where our heart's at. So, having a plan is not a bad thing. Some people might say, that's not very spiritual, having a plan. Well, God is a planner. And
Yeah,
so I think if God is a planner,
100%.
then that's good enough for us. And a
Yeah,
budget is a financial plan.
yeah,
The difficulty is, the nuance is when we start to trust the plan rather than trust God. And it's not like an either or. Of course, you've got to trust your plan. If you don't trust the plan, you're not going to follow it. But it's where ultimately your trust is and your security is. And there's a subtlety to that.
yes.
You mentioned debt before.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I made a note. You said pay off your debts first before giving away, and I think I would endorse that wisdom with possibly just a little extra, which
Mm,
is perhaps there's something within someone's like plan and budget that they might have
mm,
set to pay off debt. Perhaps there's something they want to almost just circle as like a almost like a heart posture that
yeah,
I wanted to give a small amount to back to God. I want to give a small amount away, even, kind of recognizing the journey, recognizing kind of, I like the principle of first fruits in Scripture. I think, actually, imagine you're hungry at the end of a kind of winter and it's about to be harvest, and it is, and then you kind of the first stuff you harvest, which I think is something within first fruits of it being like some of the best as well. So it's the
yes,
best and the first, and there's a bit of
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
desperation, but
yeah,
I first give that to God before I then take what I need. And I'm not saying don't pay off your debt, almost give away before paying off your debts. But I do wonder if there's something. I think if I was like mentoring someone personally, I might say, is there
mm,
a way you can sort of almost in
mm,
your heart and as like a posture say, okay, actually, I'm giving something first to God
yes.
and then trusting He's going to help me pay my debts. And that might not be tithing at that stage that at all,
Yeah,
but just to sort of throw that one in. I
it's
actually
really
had quite
yeah.
go
Sorry,
on.
it's really, really helpful. And I'm sure that, say, if someone is working with MK Money Lifeline, who, we
Yes.
love and we support as a church, they'd help someone build a personal budget with some discretionary spending in there. And
Yeah.
you could, while you're meeting your commitments in terms of repayments for debt, you've got a choice around a small proportion of money. And you can say, okay, I'm going to give a small portion of that small portion, and that's going to be okay,
Yeah.
that's my heart attitude. God, I'm just wanting to give this away to you to show where my trust is.
Yeah. Is it the widow's mite where Jesus is out of
Yeah.
her lack?
Yes.
So there's something there, isn't it? It's not out of
Yeah.
the abundance that we can kind of doesn't really matter. It's out of that lack,
Yeah.
and it's the heart thing. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you wanted to we should talk about with debt? One of your questions was, I'm struggling with debt. What should I do?
Mm.
And you've already
Yeah.
started to answer that, but is there anything else you'd want to add in?
Yeah. I don't think I want to get into kind of really practical specific things like, differentiate between secure and insecure. debt or loans, consolidate, all those kind. I think there's advice out there, and I would really point to MK Money Lifeline if you really have some significant debt to work through.
Yeah.
But then there's also, I hope, more and more resources out there. And this is one of the things. It's great what you said about people you've been mentored by, but so many of us, so many people, have had no training or education in terms of how to manage their money. And so we're just doing the best that we can, and we're making it up as we go along. And of course, money can often be an emotional thing, not just a rational thing. And so there's multiple things going on for us. And so accessing help and support, finding mentors, talking about it is just so important. And I think the biggest thing I would say I'd re-emphasize is that I think that because debt can make us feel so hopeless and despairing and inadequate, there's such a temptation to bury our head in the sand. And of course, debt doesn't stand still. It will get worse unless you're making it better, unless you're improving it. And so the biggest thing, probably the hardest thing for anyone listening, will be to acknowledge it. Do whatever you can to acknowledge it, and then you can start to, particularly with God's grace, start to work on that and improve it. And just to reiterate, as a church family, we would stand behind this being a no condemnation thing. 100%. Everyone would have struggled on some level with finances, with managing money or debt at some point in their lives, and so this is a beautiful church. No condemnation, know each other, support each other, and bring hope into this situation, because God wants us to have hope.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. I've said most of this a bit already, but I got some advice from my youth leader when I was a teenager about how to save in a very specific and helpful way with, it's an old way of doing it, but like cash into envelopes or kind of little pots that sort of spread throughout the year. And I'm so thankful for little nuggets like that. Can I ask you a really practical question? What is your thoughts on credit cards? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they neutral? What would you advise someone who perhaps was thinking, should I get a credit card?
Or are they ugly?
Good, bad, neutral, ugly.
Yeah, I had a conversation with all my sons about this. Most of my answers, it depends. So for someone who knows they have a real challenge with impulse and impulse buying, credit, I would say, is something to be very, very, very wary of.
Yes.
I'm not saying that we need to live our lives in fear, but I think there is something about being wise, knowing ourselves, knowing our struggles. And I'm not an expert. We keep saying this in these podcasts and in the sermons. We're not experts in these subjects, so we're giving it a sense of what we think is right. I think that increasingly having a good credit rating is important for future things, like perhaps you're going to need a loan to buy a car. Perhaps you're going to want to buy an apartment or a home at some point. Not everyone will be able to or want to, but perhaps you will. If that's the case, then credit rating can be helpful for that. And credit rating comes from having credit and paying it off. And so it might be that there's a particular bonus on a credit card, whereas if you pay it off every month, you still get kind of points in some way. So you're using a credit card intentionally in that way, and that's the kind of conversation with one of my sons. So yeah, it depends. I think that sorry, I'm waffling a bit, but I think my opinion would be that the availability of credit seems to have got out of balance with people's ability to manage it. So credit is more widely available, and it's meant that more people have got into trouble. And I don't believe there's always a duty of care towards people in offering levels of credit that they're not prepared for. We might talk about this a little bit in some of the subsequent questions, but how do you learn a new skill? When you do small take tiny small steps and review and check and learn. And perhaps there's something about that with a credit card as well. You start very, very carefully in a small way, in slow way, perhaps even having some accountability around it, so that it doesn't get away from you. You draw boundaries around what you're going to use it for and not going to use it in other ways. So there's a real intention and purpose and a bit of a safety net underneath that as well. Perhaps that would be a way to explore that. What would you say?
I think I really appreciate the nuance you've given. You haven't given kind of short, quick answers. I think as a principle, spend what you have rather than what you don't have as a very kind of initial start is useful.
Yes.
And so you might not be able to afford the ... you would really like, but
Yes.
what can you afford?
Yes.
And so I would, for myself, we've stayed away from credit cards. We haven't used credit cards apart from on occasions it's been unavoidable, like traveling overseas on
Yeah.
occasions.
Yeah.
And I think if I was like advising, shepherding a little bit, I'd probably start there.
Mm.
Don't unless you have to,
Mm.
and don't go into debt.
Yeah.
Don't get a credit card
Yeah.
because these things are dangerous. It sort of swallows you up. It takes you further than you want it to go and keeps you longer than you want it to stay. You know,
Yeah.
sin does that.
Yeah.
And credit and debit aren't sin. I'd just like to say, but I know my vulnerabilities, and so there's partly knowing yourself, partly that kind of some of the principles you mentioned about just I can trust God for my securities in Him, and I can be
Mm.
content. So yeah, I think it's like the system, it isn't neutral. Credit cards are neutral, but there it's worth recognizing there's a design kind of way of working to try and get money out of people.
Yeah.
They want you to default on your loan. They want you to kind of not pay it all off at once. And you see so many people trapped in debt.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you said about there's no shame. Talk about it, get help.
Mm.
But if you have choice to not go there in the first place or to make different choices,
Yes.
yeah, I think I'd really
Mm.
encourage people not to. You mentioned gambling. I'm so glad you mentioned it because again, it's very different example, but an example of how easy it is to get taken further and deeper into something. And I
Yeah.
think I hope in our society that there'll be some changes in the future, kind of around advertising and around just how ubiquitous it is, how easy it is. Again, they're trying to entice you in. The different adverts you see around sport, and I'm going to try and get you to do a bit more and stay a bit longer. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mentioned I can't remember a time when um, promotion of an adverts for gambling is so prevalent. And if you've got a struggle in that area, how difficult it is, to keep away from it. So yeah, I would say that's a real negative development, unfortunately.
Okay, really helpful. I hope that's served people. I wanted to ask. So there's one of your questions was where can I get practical help,
Yeah.
educational resources that help me manage my money?
Yeah.
You've mentioned a bit of that already.
Yeah.
Any
And there's
other?
and there's courses. Yeah. Yeah. So I probably won't recommend a single one, but if you Google that or use your preferred AI agent, um, there are free courses on how do I create a budget,
Yes.
or if you've got a basic budget, what are the ways of maximizing your money? I probably will say Money Saving Expert. I think there's lots of really helpful things on there, but
Yes.
for so many people, they won't be taught it in school. They won't have seen it modeled well in their home. No one's mentored them in this, and so they're making it up as they go along, and
Yeah.
it can be scary. And you don't know what you don't know, and so just finding some resources out there. There are a lot of free resources, and that can really, really help.
Are there any tools you use that you're not necessarily recommending, but because I think it's helpful in these podcasts for people to hear some examples?
Yeah, yeah. I know some people use apps to track their spending. I don't. That I just have a spreadsheet. So we have a budget, and we have categories of spending in that budget, and then
Okay.
I just track I track all the spending against those categories. And so whether we're on, keeping the budget or not, we need to make adjustments or
Hmm.
changes. And of course, your bills never stay the same, whether it's gas, electricity, or it's fuel for the car, or different things, and so you've got to keep on top of your budget and keep updating it. So yeah, other people do cleverer things with, I think, with apps, and yeah, I'm probably a bit too old for that.
We use something called Google Keep. It's something that both Sam and I can write on the same sort of notes. It's a note-taking kind of app.
Yeah.
We have a blank pro forma. So each week we have a certain amount of money for shopping, certain amount of money for fuel, certain amount of money for spending, certain amount of money for generosity. Those four categories each
Yeah.
week. Then we have a couple of monthly categories. And
Mm.
so if I'm in Aldi and I spend £23.96, I try before I leave Aldi to write it down,
Great.
and it goes on there. And then Sam and I are sort of totaling up, and we're seeing how much is left
Yeah.
in the week. And
Yeah.
sometimes we slightly go over on one
Yeah.
week, and we try and recoup that, or
Yeah.
we sometimes had to pull money back out that we've tried to save at the beginning of the month. So
Yeah. Yeah.
like saving it at the beginning and then
Yeah.
sometimes recouping. And that
Excellent.
was all. That's a kind of digital version. It's not a very
Yeah.
It's a bit of an old-fashioned version really now as well, of doing what people used to do, which was have a notebook.
Yeah.
But I do think I would, I don't want to encourage anything too strongly, but I
Yeah.
do want to bring some specific kind of examples and encouragement. Write down everything you spend and
Mm.
write it down there and then if you
Mm.
can, or,
Mm.
I imagine you'd be more disciplined than me at maybe doing it at the end of the day or at the end of the week. That's about knowing yourself and knowing
Yeah.
what works for you. For
Yeah.
me, if I don't write it down there and then, I forget about it. So it's important for me to do that. And for Sam and I working together as a team, if we're both
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
on the same
Yes.
thing, a
Yeah.
collaborative kind of note keeping thing, that enables us to work together and sort of
Really
it's
helpful.
yeah. So and then you can kind of we then have a spreadsheet where we all of the bits come together. And yeah, I'd encourage people to find a way that works for you within it to
Mm.
allow you to
Yeah.
budget, to spend what you have,
Yes.
and also there to build in margin. What have you got any examples of how you try and not reap to the edge of the field,
Yeah. I mean,
whether from your own life or someone else's?
the, the biggest thing for me is constructing a budget.
Yeah,
The budget is not, okay, spend right up to the maximum amount we earn, but planning to it's not sophisticated. It's just what you said earlier, planning to spend less than you earn, and then you have the margin. And then it's like, okay, God, what do you want me to do with this? So, okay, I'm going to save this proportion. You said your category of generosity. That's a lovely one. So, what proportion, in addition to regular giving, would you give for generosity? I think it's a great idea.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that idea, that Old Testament picture of not going to the edge of your field. And I just really felt challenged and encouraged, like, not in a
Mm,
condemnation way, in an encouragement. Yeah, that's the Christian life. That's
yeah,
what following that being the people of God. There is space around us. There's
yes,
space around the edges.
yeah,
I don't mean I have to stay on the edge, but for people to
yeah,
come and be blessed by
yes,
being in the community. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that is so, so beautiful.
yeah,
Is it bad? One of your questions, is it bad to have savings? Is it bad
yeah,
to have a kind of stockpile of resources or whatever?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think at some point I need to be asking you the questions.
You need
But
to get in there first, mate. I'm just quick off the whatever. Yeah,
off the mark,
off
thank you
my
for asking that because there's a couple of questions I think I definitely want to get to today. So, yeah, let's categorically say it's not bad to have savings. It's not bad to have resources. It's not bad to have money. Uh,
great.
it's what's going on in our hearts.
Yeah,
But the interesting thing is, what we do with our money can often reveal what's going on in our hearts.
yeah,
So, I kind of went back to one of my answers I said earlier. How amazing would it be if we had, a group of people in the church who were kind of gifted, financially in terms
mhm,
of where they're, and they're mentoring each other in terms of how best to utilize those resources and
mhm,
build on each other's ideas and encourage each other in giving and investing rather than only keeping.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, it's not bad. I didn't have time yesterday. I could have done a bit of a study in Proverbs in terms of all of the Proverbs that, locate wisdom in preparing for the future.
Yes.
It's not always going to be, sunny and a great day. Sometimes, the roof's going to need repairing. Sometimes there's going to be uh, unexpected events, and so having savings is wise. It's prudent. Um, but what I try and do with my own heart is say, okay, God, I've saved these, but are you telling me to do something different with them? So you might have saved them up, and you're thinking, great, I'm going to use these savings for this, and God may say, the whole earth belongs to me. I would like you to invest them in this way. I'd like you to give that away. And it's like, oh no, my security's going. But I think that's how it works. That's as best as I understand it. God doesn't have a problem with us saving, building up resources, but at any moment, we should be asking God use of this, and at any moment we should be open to Him saying, "I'd like you to use it in this way."
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. It's so challenging, isn't it? Because I've saved it and therefore it's mine is the
Absolutely.
kind of is a fallacy we can live with. I've put it aside for that holiday, that nice meal out, that trip.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the idea of okay, well, amazing job saving for the last 3 years, and actually I've got an even better spend on giving it to such and such a cause.
I remember just as you said, something came to mind. I remember Terry Virgo talking about an anecdote, and he and Wendy had put money away, and I think it was like an ISA. It was a guaranteed interest rate, and it matured after like 5 years or something. And he's like, great. And God said, I want you to give that away. So there was that sense of, I don't want to say too much, because it's not my story, but there's a sense of like I've been waiting for this investment to mature. I've I've invested diligently. I've put money into it monthly, really diligently, prudently, wisely, as good husband, good steward. It matures. God says, "Now I'd like to give that away." It's like, oh, but of course, God's no woman or man's debtor.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I just feel the heart work going on there.
Oh yeah,
To give that away like resentfully, bitterly wouldn't be right. But if to
gritted
get to a
teeth.
place, yeah, but to get to a place of okay, God, I can freely give it away, and just
Yeah,
all that teaches you in trusting God, in
yeah,
in the joy and freedom there. Sam and I have got smaller, but we've got stories.
mm,
There's something about a track record of proving God's faithfulness. That's
yeah.
part of the adventure.
Great.
Actually, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
need this.
yes,
And
definitely.
we've had adventures of giving away and then getting blessed in a different sense. And you're like, well, if we hadn't done that, would that have happened? I don't know. But what it did do is that adventure of as we trusted God, He more than provides for us and more than blesses us. And I think that again, that's the picture of the Christian life, for there to be margin and space for others, for there to be joy and freedom. I'm not a slave to this anymore. How do I kill it? Well, I move into the freedom of giving away. Yeah, so beautiful.
There's
Can
one
we talk?
question that we
Go
haven't
on.
covered. I'd really love to get to it because I'm
Yeah,
conscious of
please.
time. For some people in the church, they won't have known this or be taught this, and it's like a brand new thing in terms of
Mm,
okay, so how much should I give,
mm,
to the church?
yes,
Should I give regularly, and should I tithe?
yes.
So, what would you say to some of those questions?
Yeah, I think the idea of tithing is a tricky one in Christianity, because some people would say, well, is it more of an Old Testament idea?
Yeah,
So a tithe in you know what I understand of Old Testament teaching is approximately 10% of what came in, you gave back. That again, that first fruits principle in my understanding of it. And so, is the tithe still relevant for Christians? Is it spoken about in the New Testament? I don't think it's spoken about much, but that kind of principle of giving generously kind of is almost like, the tithe, and then actually even more of a free heart. So kind of to take you beyond, not below.
yes,
Um, for me,
exactly.
just speaking kind of, I guess, briefly on it, and again, not really any notes on this, so forgive me if I'm a bit muddled, but I would say it's a place to aim for,
Mm,
and then there's possibly a place to move from. I think it's a
mm,
use. I see it as a useful guide.
yes.
So as you may know, well, you know, James, but as people listening may know, I've started a small business on the side in the last 6 months,
Mm,
and that is now has some income coming into it. I have decided at the start that I would just very quickly, very easily tithe. So
mm,
10% of what comes in, I literally over to Grace Church.
yeah.
That feels like a nice starting point,
Yeah.
a place to perhaps then move forward from as the spirit leads.
Yeah.
So it's not like to kind of think, oh, I've tithed, I'm okay, gets quickly into legalism, doesn't it?
I agree.
But and almost like, oh, I've now tithed, and almost say like, oh, that bit's God's and the rest's mine isn't stewardship either. So it's really important we keep those
That's right.
principles of it's all God's.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that I'll grudgingly give that bit, but at least I've got this bit. Um, so there's lots of heart stuff just to explore there,
Yeah.
which I think I've battled with different parts of that as well. I love the idea of like 90%. There's you there's a quote around this that'll be cleaner than what I'm about to say, but this idea of like actually God's blessing in your 90% is far more than kind of doing it on your own with the
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely.
That would be our story as well. And again,
Absolutely.
if you are in the position where you're able to start early, which is so this might be for some people coming, let's perhaps you've got all sorts of financial commitments, you've come into faith late or come into the idea of giving late.
Yeah.
This is maybe something to slowly work towards.
Yeah.
It's not like you're only good enough if you kind of get to a point of perhaps tithing. But for those of us starting out early, so with our kids,
Yeah.
our children, so my son's referee, and they earn money from it, and they're learning to do that sort of principle of tithing as a starting point right
Yeah.
from the start, and say your first paycheck, your first
Yeah.
um, budget that you set perhaps in a new marriage, to think
Yeah.
about actually how do we do that kind of first fruits giving.
Yeah.
There's a question around like pre-tax, post-tax,
Yeah.
and again, you can get into legalism very, very quickly.
Mm,
Just to say, we've always felt like we've wanted it to be the first fruits.
mm,
Before the tax man, we
mm.
want to give to God. And now that's a challenge, and that's not something necessarily everyone would agree with.
Yeah.
But I would just say, work it through in your heart on the
Yeah.
journey of discipleship, following Jesus, trusting Him.
Yeah.
What can you do, and where are you at, and what are you moving towards? What would
Yeah.
you say, James?
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant answer. I read yesterday in the morning, just before church, Romans 6, which is
Okay.
really emphasizes that we are no longer under law; we're under grace.
Amen. Yeah,
So there's no New Testament clear answer. This is what you should give to the church, and this is the proportion.
that's right.
Um, I've heard others say, and I agree with it. Well, if the Old Testament requirement was 10% with other things on top, actually, so 10% you could say would be the minimum.
Yes.
How could it be that as followers of Jesus who saved by grace, um, and all of the benefits we have, the new covenant, how could we give less? How could we not at least give to that level? I'm nervous around the legalism thing as well, though. I think it could be
Me
quite
too.
quick to, oh, great, I've achieved this now. So either pride or condemnation. You hit a level and suddenly, yeah, I'm this, I'm that, and it's in all of our hearts, or many of our hearts, I think. So I'm nervous of that. I did like the Second Corinthians passage, which is, give what you've decided to in your heart without compulsion. God lives a cheerful giver. So it's almost like God saying, I don't need your money.
Yeah.
If you're not giving to me cheerfully, don't give it.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is really countercultural, I think, in terms of some people's understanding of what the church is looking for. I think there is something primary about giving to the place in which you worship. I
Yes, I was going to
respect
say, give
others.
where. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had conversations with the Christians in the past, and they felt called to give to a charity rather than be tithing to the church, and I respect that. It's a conscience decision. And so we're under grace, not under law. And so all those things are allowable, but I struggle to match that up with New Testament priorities, I would say. But I'll try and say that gently rather than that as this is an instruction, or command. I also read just recently a really nice pithy way, I think, of saying what you said, which was most people are 3S givers. spontaneous, sporadic, sparingly. And we can challenge ourselves to be 3P givers: priority, percentage, progressive.
Hmm.
That is really
Wow,
cool.
that's really good. Say them again. Go on. What are the S's?
Yeah. So most people are 3S givers: spontaneous, sporadic, sparingly. We can challenge ourselves to become 3P givers: priority, percentage, progressive.
Hmm. Really good. Really good. James, anything else you want to touch on before we ended our episode for today?
No, not for me. What would you say is the last word?
Um, as the last word, that feels like pressure. I don't know. I recognize the worry. That was probably the one. If we'd have had another 5 minutes, I might have said, could we talk more about the link between worry
Oh
and
yeah.
money? And it
Yes.
really comes out in Matthew 6.
Yes.
Um, and I would probably just want to draw a link between what we've talked about today and we've looked at in terms of mental health and
Yeah.
financial health
Yeah.
and spiritual health. Sorry, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And just
Great.
kind of say, actually,
Yeah.
if you have particular anxiety
Yeah.
and worry connected to money, perhaps listen back, draw a link, and go into some of the principles we've looked at there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, allow that heart work and that kind of sense of security. The Lord's my helper.
Mm,
Actually, He's the one who provides and knows what I need. And
yes.
yeah, I just recognize that's a big one for people, and want to encourage people to
Great
go on
point.
the
Yeah.
journey
Yeah.
in that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, James, thank you for leading us beautifully in this. Would it be a priority? Would there be that progress? We be on a journey together into all
Mm,
that God has for us? Would the gospel, that new creation identity,
yeah.
lead us to financial health, both for ourselves, so we get to enjoy it, but actually, so that we're blessing out into the world.
Yeah.
It's a kind of, you said about it flowing through us and out into the world, so a blessing out into the world, and ultimately for the glory of God. So thank you everyone for listening again today. Do continue to enjoy the series. We've got two more to come up: relational health, and then what if I can't be healthy. So
Yeah.
looking forward to those coming up in the next couple of weeks. But for now, we'll say goodbye and may God bless you richly.